All right, great. So we are live on YouTube as well. So, and Chris, now you can see my screen, right?
I can see your screen. Yes, I can.
Excellent.
Can people see me? Or can they see?
They should be able to see you.
Sorry?
Right. So let us begin this webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Salman Khimani. I am the member of the Education Board for Pakistan. This is the fourth of our webinar series that we have initiated in the past 2 weeks. And the webinar today we have on the topic of liberal arts education, pathways and prospects. So thank you all for joining us. We have with us today a very distinguished speaker, Dr. Christopher Taylor. He is the Vice President of Academic Affairs and Dean of Faculty at AKEB'P University. Dr. Taylor has a vast experience of working in the US in a liberal arts context.
Very good. Salman, are we ready to go? I can't see the screen anymore. Oh, yes, I can. Yes, I can. Very good. Hello, everybody. It's a great pleasure and I'd like to thank the Aga Khan Education Board for Pakistan for inviting me to participate in this webinar on liberal arts education. I am the Vice President for Academic Affairs and Dean of Faculty at AKEB'P University. Some people can't hear me, I think, Salman. Some people are indicating that they can't hear me.
So Chris, I'm able to hear you well.
Okay. So somebody's pointing to their ear saying they can't hear. Is that all right? Just go ahead. There's 2 participants raised hand. From Imran.
Your volume is fine. Your volume is fine. So those who are unable to hear, may I request them to please use earphones?
Earphones, okay. Okay, very good. So what I'd like to do today is talk about several questions. First of all, what does a liberal arts or liberal education mean? Just waiting for the screen to come back. I'm not sure. Are you raised? Can you press? There we go. So what does the liberal arts or a liberal education mean? That's the first question. Next is what are the liberal arts? And next, what is the value of a liberal arts or liberal education? Okay, next. So let's start with the question of what does a liberal arts or a liberal education mean? And so let's, Salman, if you can push ahead. So the term liberal arts comes from the Latin artes liberalis, and in the medieval period, next, sorry. Salman, can you press next again? Salman, can you press the space bar? So in the medieval period, artes liberalis were contrasted to the artes meccanicae. Artes meccanicae consisted of work like weaving, agriculture, masonry, trade, warfare, and all of the craft industries. Next. In contrast, the artes liberalis referred to to 7 fields of learning, which were divided into 2 groups. The first was called the Trivium, and the second was called the Quadrivium. The Trivium included grammar, rhetoric, logic, and the Quadrivium included music, geometry, arithmetic, and astronomy. Next. In today's world, the Artes Mechanicae, whoops, could you go, yeah, would translate into technical or professional fields of knowledge. The liberal arts today refer to the following fields: the arts, the humanities, the social sciences, and the natural sciences. So when I say the technical fields, that would be fields like business, medicine, fields like very technical fields like dentistry and things like that. The liberal arts, and when I say the arts, that means music, art, sculpture, calligraphy, things like that. The humanities are a group of fields like history, philosophy, the classics, for example, foreign languages are in there usually. Fields like religious studies, the study of religions, and literature. These are all in the humanities. The social sciences include fields like sociology, psychology, economics, political science, international relations, and fields like that. The natural sciences, of course, include chemistry, biology, physics, and the engineering sciences as well. Okay, next. So the word artes in artes liberalis does not mean art. Artes comes from the Latin word ars, which means skills. Okay, next. And the Latin term liberalis does not mean liberal, in contrast to conservative in the political sense, but next. Liberalis is related to the Latin word liberalis, which means free. Okay, next. Free and I mean here in contrast to words like subjugated, imprisoned, or constrained. So in other words, a liberal arts or liberal education means an education for a free person. That's what it means. It doesn't mean a liberal education in the sense of liberal politically. It means an education for a free person. So it's from the Latin artis liberalis, okay? The skills of an education that a free person would need. So a liberal arts or liberal education isn't designed to give you much in terms of technical knowledge. It's not designed to teach you what to think in a way that a technical or professional education would teach you what to think, but rather how to think. Okay. So liberal arts or liberal consists of 2 parts. Next. The first part is called a core, and the second part is called the major. And if we go to the next slide, you can think of these 2 parts, the core and the major, in the shape of a T. So the top of the T is the core or the breadth, and I'll come back to this in a minute. And the vertical line in the T is the major or the depth. So the way this works is the idea of a liberal arts education is that you get both breadth and depth. So you study a number of fields across all 4 of the liberal arts, which, as I said, were arts, humanities, social sciences, and the natural sciences, which includes mathematics and so forth. And so the idea is that every liberal arts student takes a little bit of all 4 of these areas. So in a core, you would have some courses in the creative arts, you would have some courses in the humanities, You would have some courses in the social sciences, and you would have some courses in the natural sciences. And then in the depth area, you would choose a particular field. You might choose the field of history. You might choose the field of economics. You might choose the field of philosophy. You might choose the field of chemistry or mechanical engineering. You might choose the field of dance or music. So all of these are the depth area. And the idea of a liberal arts education is that a free person should be able to think across many different fields and also be able to think in great depth in a particular field. And the idea, so in other words, an engineer, if an engineer is exposed to philosophy, to music, to art, to economics, you'll actually have a better engineer than somebody who only studied engineering. And the reason for that is that a person, an engineer who had studied all of these different fields would be able to think outside the box, would be able to draw on ideas that they had learned in different fields of knowledge. They would also, of course, have great depth in the area of their major. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, the question is, what is the value of a liberal arts education in today's world? Now, the point I'd like to make here is that I think our world has moved from one age to another age since about 1995. And when I'm talking about ages of human history here, I'm talking about vast periods of time. So for example, most of human history consisted of what was called the hunter-gatherer age. Human beings lived by hunting and gathering food. About 8,000 years ago, there was something called the Agrarian Revolution, when human beings learned to farm. People can still continue to hunt and gather, but great civilizations grew up, as you all know. In one area was, one of the earliest areas, of course, was the Indus Valley, right here where we are. Another area, of course, was in Iraq and what became Babylonia, in ancient Egypt along the Nile River, and so forth. Close to large river systems, we saw the development of agriculture. And that was the second great age of human history. The third great age of human history was called the Industrial Age. And the Industrial Age began around 1850 and continued, I would argue, up until about 1995 or so. Since 1995, roughly, we have entered into a new world, which is sometimes called the knowledge age, the digital age, the internet age. These are all different. We don't even have an agreed upon name for all of these, but we live in a new age. And this new world that we live in is characterized by rapid change and uncertainty. Click on the next one, please, for me, Salman. So this new world is often called a VUCA world, V-U-C-A. What does that mean? So let's go to the next slide. So a VUCA world is, VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. This is a world where, and we're living, as you can see right now, we're living in a very volatile world where suddenly everything is shut down. The entire global economy is shut down, which causes a great deal of uncertainty and so forth. But it's also volatile in the sense of rapid technological changes, where entire industries cease to exist, new industries come into being. For example, one of the most valuable companies in the world today by market valuation is a company called Facebook. Facebook came into being before some of you were born, and so it's a good example of a brand new industry that didn't exist even in your lifetime. So this is a world which is increasingly volatile, uncertain, complex, and also very ambiguous, meaning uncertain, various possible choices and so forth. if you just click on the last point for me, Salman. The question I'd like to sort of open our conversation with today is, how do you prepare for a career in a VUCA world? How do you prepare educationally for a world which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous? And the argument I would make is that a liberal education or a liberal arts education, because it consists of these two aspects of breadth and depth, where you learn a little bit about a lot of things and then you learn a great deal about a certain area, is a kind of education which, although it's a very old kind of education in the modern world, it's also an education which is perfectly suited for the kind of VUCA world that we now live in. So I'd like to say, in conclusion to my remarks here, before we open it up for conversation and questions, some people might ask, well, I don't quite understand exactly what a liberal arts education is. I understand that there's a core to it, and I understand that there's a major, so there's breadth and there's depth. But as I look around at universities, I see that each university has a different curriculum. And that's true. There is no one liberal arts education. In other words, when you look at many different liberal arts universities and colleges, you will find that they offer different curriculums. And that's the whole point, is it's not a specific course that you take. So you won't find that in every liberal arts college or university that you take exactly the same set of courses. Every liberal arts college has different courses that they offer, and that's fine. That you will find that they do cover the 4 areas that I talked about. That is, they do ask you to take some courses in the arts, some courses in the humanities, some courses in the social sciences, and some courses in the natural sciences and mathematics. But they will all have a different mix, and that's fine. So there's not a particular set of courses that you take. And then of course you will take courses that are focused on your major. So if you major in, let's say, electrical engineering, or you major in history, again, there will tend to be some conformity there on the kinds of courses you are expected to take in your major. But each liberal arts university and college will have its own curriculum. Sometimes they will refer to it as a core. Sometimes they will refer to it as general education requirements. But they all have the same basic idea, which is that you are going to take a wide variety of courses in these 4 areas: arts, humanities, social sciences, and natural sciences. And then you're going to take a number of courses in great depth, which is going to be your major. And the idea, again, as I said, is that in a VUCA world, in a world that's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, that this stretching of your mind in breadth as well as in depth prepares you to think outside the box and to adjust and adapt to a world that is constantly changing and is very uncertain. So what I'd like to do now, if we can, I guess we can take down the presentation. I'll come up on the screen, I hope, and my colleague Salman Khemani will take your questions and pose those to me, and I will try to answer them.
Thank you, Chris. So I think the chat box is open. You can either type your questions or raise your hand. Once those who raise their hand, I will unmute their mics and they can ask questions. So, Sarish, you have your hand raised, so I've unmuted you. Sarish.
Okay, Suresh.
No, I think Sarish probably raised her hand by mistake.
Okay, so, okay.
So, Chris, while we wait for questions,
sure.
There's a question I wanted to raise here to begin our conversation.
Sure.
And When there's a high school student who is a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, and they are getting a lot of career advice from their school counselors, from their parents, from their friends, family, what are some factors they should consider in while they're choosing for an education option between liberal arts and a more traditional route?
Okay, again, I would, the point I was making about the way that the world has changed in the last 25 years or so is critically important. So in other words, take into account the kind of world that you're going to lead your professional career in. And it's a world, as I said, that if you train for a certain, there are many fields of knowledge over the last 25 years which have simply disappeared, right? So if you trained, for example, to be a videotape recorder repair person, right? Videotape recorders no longer exist. I mean, they exist, but no one ever uses videotapes. We all use DVDs, or now even DVDs don't exist so much. We're downloading, downloading from the web. If you look around you, think about Uber drivers, right? Or Kareem drivers. We know that AI is coming on, that autonomous vehicles are being created, right? You might think, okay, so that kind of a career is probably not a great idea because pretty soon a machine will do it. And I use that as just an example, but there are many, many industries where human beings are no longer doing the work. Machines can do them better and faster and cheaper than a human being can do it. So the thing I would ask you to think about as you think about your career is, first of all, is that career going to be around 20 or 30 years from now? Or do you think that that career is going to cease existing? Is artificial intelligence or machines in some way going to take over that function? And again, in a world that is constantly changing, that is in flux, how do you prepare for a career in a world that is constantly changing and very unpredictable? And so the argument that I have been trying to make in this presentation today is that by having a liberal arts education or a liberal education, you prepare for, your mind is prepared for a world that can change in many different directions. Because in a liberal arts education, you really are not trained to be a specific thing, right? Your mind is trained to think in a certain way, which is to bring all various kinds of fields of knowledge together. And if you look at lists of, for example, the leading figures in many different fields, let me just take the field of business. If you look at the leaders of major Fortune 500 companies, right? Or major corporations around the world, somebody like Jack Ma, who created Alibaba, his major in college was English literature, right? Somebody like Thiel, the founder of PayPal, his major was in philosophy. If you look down the list of majors of most of the large 500 Fortune 500 companies, very many of the most important names, Steve Jobs, he actually never finished college, but he was majoring in the liberal arts before he dropped out of college to found Apple. So the point here is that liberal arts produces a very specific kind of a mind that is flexible, a mind that is adaptable. And the reason for that is because that mind has been exposed to many different kinds of thinking. So let me stop at that point and see if there are more questions.
Sure. So a lot of questions have started coming in. So I think one of the question is, what are some skills that are associated with liberal arts education?
Okay, so there are some specific skills which are very important in a liberal arts education. The first one is the ability to what we call read critically, so that you know how to read. When I would say critical here, I don't mean criticize. What I mean here is that you can read something and ask questions about it as you're reading it, right? So the ability to take a text of anything, it could be a text from a newspaper article, it could be a text from a manual describing a new appliance. It could be, you know, a text in a magazine article or a book, and that you start arguing with the text right away. You ask questions. Well, what about this? What about that? And you're constantly testing the assumptions of the writer. So people who are trained in the liberal arts are trained to kind of constantly question and ask questions about whatever it is they're reading. They often have a pen or a pencil, and they're underlining words and writing questions in the margins as they go along. So the ability to read critically is a very, and not just read critically, but also to think critically. So if somebody like me right now is making an argument, you would be asking, as you are, asking all kinds of good critical questions. So critical thinking is a very, very important skill that you learn in the liberal arts. Another very important skill you learn in liberal arts is how to write clearly, how to write arguments clearly and convincingly. And that's another reason why the liberal arts have been so valued by employers. Many employers say today, quite correctly, that there are a lot of technical aspects of my job that I will train the person coming into this job how to do. And those skills change, because we're living in a VUCA world, those skills change very rapidly, right? And no university can actually prepare people for the kinds of skills I need done in my job. But what I need is a person who can think outside the box, who can solve problems. I'll teach them the technical skills when I hire them. But I need somebody who can think clearly and think critically and who can write clearly. These are skills that I would say are the specific skills that come out from a liberal arts education. Now, of course, you also get some specific skills in whatever your major is. So if you major in chemistry, for example, or you majored in biology or in engineering, you would learn specific skills in that area of your major as well. So those are the three areas I would say that you would learn broadly: how to think critically, how to write well, and then you would learn some technical skills in the respective field that you have majored in.
Right. So one interesting question is, what are some disadvantages of liberal arts education? Okay.
So I think that the biggest disadvantage that many people have today is actually not a disadvantage. It's a misconception, and that is, what can I do with this, right? How can I, if I'm not trained specifically in one thing, right? So usually somebody who has a bachelor levels degree, for example, in chemistry, is not really fully a chemist at this point, or even an engineer. They're going to learn a lot more as they go along. And so there's sometimes a fear of like, well, what kind of a job am I going to get? Because I don't have any specific skills beyond the fact that I can think critically and I can write critically. And then I have some skills in whatever the field is that I have studied, whether it's chemistry or biology or engineering or computer science or history or philosophy, whatever. What am I going to be able to do with it? So that's the concern that I think most people have. But as I said, the founder of PayPal, which is now one of the most valuable corporations in the world, right? He studied philosophy. And the argument I'm trying to make here is that the liberal arts trains the mind to think in sort of unconventional ways, so that somebody said, hey, look, I can figure out a way of putting a bank online, essentially, and arranging for people to pay from their bank accounts for services all around the world. That's an example. Steve Jobs created Apple. He had an interest in technology and computers. He was a kind of a geek who worked in his garage on electrical things and early computers. But then he took a course in calligraphy. And he was thinking about, well, you know, computer screens are pretty ugly. In those days, computer screens were mostly black, and you had little green writing on the computer screen. And Steve Jobs said, there's a better way to do this. I can make beautiful fonts. I can make beautiful calligraphy work on a computer. And so that's the good example of how the liberal arts work. So I don't think there's any great drawbacks. Obviously, I think that a liberal arts education is the best kind of education, particularly for the kind of world that all of you are going to be living in and leading your professional careers in. Remember, you're going to be leading your careers in the 2020s, the 2030s, the 2040s, and the 2050s, right? So we ask ourselves today, what are people going to be doing in the 2050s? And am I going to have a job where I can, have a good career over the full span of my life? In the last, particularly in the last 15 or 20 years, I would say, I have increasingly met people who had very professional education, who have suddenly found themselves without a job. And here's a good example. So in the United States, engineering used to be a very successful field. But then as the world became globalized, people said, well, I can find engineers in India and Pakistan and China who can, do the same job for a fraction of the cost of what it would cost me to hire an American engineer. So I'm going to outsource my work to places like India and Pakistan. Today, we find that even places like India and Pakistan are finding that there are other places where you can find people cheaper to hire to do these jobs. So that's my argument about professional education. Be very careful. It's not just a question of will the job still exist when you're in your 40s or your 50s or even your 60s, or will that job be outsourced to another part of the world? So that's something you've got to think about. So the great advantage of a liberal arts education is whatever happens, and all of you are likely to have between 5 and 8 different careers over the course of your life. Think about that for a minute. Not 5 to 8 different jobs, 5 to 8 totally different careers over the course of your life. How do you prepare for a professional life in which you're likely to change your career 5 to 8 times, right? What do you train for, right? There are going to be jobs that you're going to have that don't even exist today. They don't even exist today. If there are people now who are making good livings as employees of Facebook, for example, right? 8 years ago, Facebook didn't even exist, right? So that's my argument, that's the world that all of you live in. So I don't think there actually is a downside to a liberal arts education, other than the fact that it does create a certain uncertainty. What is the specific skill that I'm going to be going out to in the world in order to find a job? And what I'm trying to argue here is don't worry about that. You will find a way because of the way your mind has been trained, right? So the liberal arts are not a thing, they're a way. It's like the Tao, right? The way of the Tao. It's a path. And your mind is trained in certain ways that allows you to be very flexible and to take many different kinds of jobs and even to create jobs. That was one of the points I was trying to make earlier, is that many of the founders of some of the greatest companies in the world today are graduates who study things like French literature, English literature, history, philosophy, right? One might ask, what possible good can I do learning philosophy? Well, Steve Jobs took courses in calligraphy, and he created the most valuable company, or one of the most valuable companies in the world today, which is Apple, right? So that's my point.
All right, so Chris, this is an interesting academic aspect or perspective to liberal arts education, right? You are being trained, you have certain skill sets which are being developed, but how do you think the industry is receiving products of liberal arts education, both globally as well as locally?
Very good question. So we're finding that the employers, both here in Pakistan and around the world, are craving liberal arts graduates. As I said, we recently had the CEO of a major telecommunications industry visiting us at my university, and he looked at us and he said, "Look, we were asking him, what can we do to provide you with the best possible graduates?" And he said, "Just make sure they learn the liberal arts well." He said, the technical knowledge is in my field. I am going to teach the people I hire, because I can guarantee you that those circumstances are changing so rapidly from year to year that there is no way that your university or any university can keep up with the speed at which things are changing. But one thing that never changes is the ability of people to think clearly, to think critically, to write well. If you can give me graduates who can think critically, who can think outside the box, who are curious, who have good writing skills, I can do the rest. And that's what we're finding from employers all across Pakistan and across the world, in fact.
Thanks, Chris. We have a raise of hands, so I'm going to unmute the person and ask the person to ask the question.
Very good.
So
yeah, thank you for allowing me to raise this question. Dr. Chris, in the context of developing world, what are some of the prerequisites that one should acquire in order to really enroll in the liberal art education? And this is something, do you think if a developing country is ready to opt for this education? Please comment.
Yes, absolutely. That's a very good question. And I would say absolutely once again, we live in a global, this is a global, a global economy now. And so it's not as if a country like Pakistan or any integrated into that global economy. And in order to succeed in that global economy, you need the skills of the global economy. So whether you're in Pakistan or in a country like Thailand or Malaysia or wherever you are, Indonesia, the same skills that are needed to succeed in this global economy that are needed in places like the United States or the United Kingdom or France or Spain or Germany, any of these countries are very much the same. So I did some work with Zia Chishti, who is a Pakistani origin. He's a businessman in the United States. And came up with a company called Invisalign. Now he owns a company here in Pakistan called TRG, as you know. And so that's the point is that you can't think of yourself as simply a resident or citizen of Pakistan. You're a citizen of a global economy, and you need to be, in order to succeed in that global economy, you need the skills that are needed across that economy. So we're finding that liberal arts, the graduates of liberal arts universities are having tremendous success in the local market here in Pakistan, but also in the global economy as well. So I don't think there's anything that separates, we used to live in a world where people in Pakistan produce certain goods and people in the United States produce other certain kinds of goods. All of that is out the window now. Many of the goods that used to be produced in the United States are now produced in China, in Mexico, and Pakistan, and vice versa. So if you look at several of the leading companies, the top 10 companies in the United States, to give you an example, Microsoft, Google, right? These are led by South Asians, people who were born in India. So that's the world that you guys live in. And I think that that's how you have to think. You have to think in a globalized sense.
excellent. So I think sort of a follow-up question to this question is that Pakistan is a relatively late entrant into the liberal arts education landscape. It has been there in the US for several decades. We also saw several universities in the Middle East coming up with liberal arts model. So if there is a student in Pakistan where within Pakistan, there are very, very handful options for liberal arts education, should the student also consider options outside of Pakistan? And do you think these are the options accessible for students in Pakistan?
Yes, I think that there are options. All again, a liberal arts education has actually existed for several centuries now in many parts of the West. It is newer, certainly in many parts of the developing world, like Pakistan. But there are options now in Pakistan. Great liberal arts education is available in Pakistan. Aga Khan University is about to start a new college of Arts and Sciences, which is will be a liberal arts institution. My own institution, Habib University, is a liberal arts institution. And these are going to be world-class liberal arts institutions. So you can, of course, go abroad, but you don't have to go abroad. You're now, that's one of the wonderful things about the world today, the globalized world, is that this kind of knowledge is readily available and will increasingly be readily available in Pakistan. Now, the one caution I would have is that many institutions in Pakistan recognize that the term liberal education or liberal arts education or liberal arts and sciences education is a kind of a buzzword. It's like Montessori school, right? Now, the word Montessori schools, right, is not actually trademarked. So anybody can say, I run a Montessori school. My wife teaches in a Montessori school, and I can tell you that there are very few schools that bear the name Montessori school, which are actually accredited by international Montessori institutes to be genuine Montessori schools. So as a result, the vast majority of schools that are claiming to be Montessori schools are actually not Montessori schools. And unfortunately, the same phenomenon is true in the liberal arts as well. Many universities that are not genuinely liberal arts universities are now claiming to be liberal arts universities because they know that it's becoming increasingly popular. So what I would urge you to do is when a university says to you that it is a liberal arts and sciences university, I would ask to see their curriculum. And always bear in mind that T-shaped figure that I gave you, and ask yourself, is the curriculum that they are teaching you both broad and is it deep? Is there a major and is there a core? And I said sometimes the core is referred to as general education requirements. And if it's not doing that, if it's saying that it's a liberal arts education, but in fact, it's only offering you courses in, say, computer science, then it in fact is not a liberal arts education. Right? So you do have to be careful. The buyer always has to be aware that the advertiser may not be truthfully advertising the product, right? So just as Montessori schools are not actually all Montessori schools, that is, the teachers are not trained. Montessori is a very exacting kind of educational system. And as I said, not every school that claims to be a Montessori school is actually a Montessori school. In fact, the majority are not. Now, unfortunately, in Pakistan right now, I would say that there are many more universities claiming to be liberal arts institutions than are actually liberal arts institutions. That's the bad news. So you do have to be careful. However, the good news is there are a number of alternatives now in Pakistan of very fine liberal arts universities that are available. So you can study in Pakistan and you can study outside of Pakistan. And I frankly don't think it makes a great deal of difference as long as you are going to a genuine liberal arts university.
So one interesting question we have received is the liberal arts education something which would be restricted to higher education only, or is it something that can be introduced early enough in the students?
That's a very good question, and I would argue that that many of the skills that lead to success in the liberal arts in higher education can be introduced earlier in high schools and in middle schools and even earlier. Good writing, of critical thinking. So if your school, or your high school, or your middle school is constantly training you to write well, and I would argue that in a country like Pakistan, you should be writing well in both Urdu and in English, and maybe even in regional languages as well. But certainly you should be writing well in Urdu and English. Does the school train you? And there are some wonderful, wonderful secondary schools in Pakistan that regularly get people into the very best liberal arts universities all around the world. So I know that education does exist already in Pakistan, but you absolutely, that success in college often it comes out of success in secondary schools. And there's some wonderful, wonderful secondary schools, and both in the local boards as well as the international boards here in Pakistan, and they do prepare students to succeed in liberal arts universities.
So one observation here is that even there are some universities in Pakistan which are offering liberal arts education. They tend to be very, very expensive. So how can students who are not very resourceful can access these universities?
That's a very good point. And increasingly in Pakistan, once again, we are seeing needs-blind admission develop. I know my own institution has needs-blind admission, and there are other universities in Pakistan that do as well. I don't know what the plan is for Aga Khan when their Faculty of Arts and Sciences comes online, but I would be shocked if it did not involve some kinds of financial assistance for students. Yes, this is absolutely an elite kind of education, and it has been historically, it certainly was the kind of education that elites in, say, the United States all got. And it was restricted to the elites, and it was not available to average people. But over the course of the 20th century, mostly the course of the 20th century, late 19th and all throughout the 20th century, there was a growing movement that recognized that talent isn't necessarily attached to wealth. And then in fact, very often there is tremendous talent that has no wealth. And so liberal arts colleges and universities in the United States were very quick to realize that they should be providing an education to the best students based on their ability, their intellectual abilities, not based on their ability to simply pay. And so that model has now come to Pakistan. My own university, about a third of each class receives 100% scholarship in order to attend. And again, this is not uncommon. This level of generosity is perhaps uncommon still in Pakistan, but there are many universities that do offer financial assistance around the world as well as in Pakistan. And so this kind of educational system is not restricted to only those who can pay. Now, I should add that we are very often we're a small liberal arts university. I don't know, I believe that the size of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences in Aga Khan is also projected to be quite small. That means that there's competition, right? It doesn't mean that everybody who wants to attend can attend for free. It means that the most capable students, and there's usually testing involved, and to select the most outstanding students, but those students can receive as much as 100% scholarships right here in Pakistan in order to attend.
Right. There are a few people who have probably missed the first part of your session today. So this question is coming back again and again, probably for the same reason. And if you could sort of repeat what kind of professions people can enter into after acquiring liberal arts education.
Very good. Excellent question. And I would say the possibilities are limitless, right? It can, people can go into insurance, they can go into sales, they can go into marketing. You can imagine, they can work for profits, they can work for nonprofits, they can work for governments, they can work for international agencies. There are absolutely no limits to what they can do. And in many cases, they actually create businesses of their own. As I was pointing out, people like Steve Jobs and Steve Thiel, the founder of PayPal, all of these people, have people like Michael Eisner, the former president of Disney, the former president of American Express. So banking and financial services, anywhere that smart people are needed, the graduates of liberal arts colleges and universities can fill those needs. And I can tell you there's not an industry in this world that does not need smart people who can think critically, who can write well, and who have the kinds of skills that liberal arts graduates have.
There's a request to share the soft copy of your presentation. So if you could share with me, I can upload it on our career website.
Absolutely. The presentation I made, you mean, or what?
Yeah. So I have it. If we have,
You have it?
if we have the permission, if we have the permission
Absolutely.
from you, we can upload it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. So if there are no further questions, we could bring a close to this webinar.
Again, I apologize for the fact that my Zoom, for some reason, won't allow me to make the presentation from my own screen, so it was a little awkward. I'm sorry for that. Anyway, I thank Salman for inviting me to participate, to the Aga Khan Education Board of Pakistan for inviting me to participate. And I wish all of you good luck as you think about your educational choices in the future. This is a critical decision that you'll be making about which educational path is the best for you. There's not one path for everybody. So you will undoubtedly find the best path for you. I hope that our conversation today has opened at least the possibility that you'll think about pursuing a liberal education after you graduate from high school, whether that's here in Pakistan or abroad. I wish you all the best of luck as you think about it. Again, if there's one thought I can leave you with, it's the thought of that T shape, the T shape with the horizontal bar of an education that has great breadth, and then the vertical bar of the T, which has great depth. So that's what the heart of a liberal arts education is. It combines the breadth of those four areas: the arts, the humanities, the social sciences, and the natural sciences, with great depth, particular field. And often colleges also offer minors. You can do double majors. So we have people who major in both, let's say, computer science and philosophy, or who major in fields like biology or chemistry and in literature. In the United States right now, in medical school, for example, they are desperately looking for graduates of liberal arts colleges and universities who want to pursue the study of medicine as well. So I'll leave you with that thought, and thank you all for your attention today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Taylor, for such an insightful session. Those who joined late, this is a recorded session, and you will have the opportunity to see the recording later on YouTube channel. It's called, if you can search for Career Substack, you can find it, the recording of the. You can also access the link on our website, which is career.substack.com. Just to remind you all, we bring you webinars every Thursdays and every Saturday. The details for webinars next week you can find on our Career Substack channel. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Thanks again, Dr. Taylor, and we wish you.
For the Hafiz, and good luck to everybody.